Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing. I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. Today, I get to introduce you to somebody that is dear to my heart, who really understands what relationship is about. And as I read some of her bio and some of what she has in store for us today, I so am happy to let her be here to tell you this story, but it did touch base with me in my own journey to find a wonderful man that I'm now married to. So we will talk more about how Robyn plays a part in helping people find their relationship and to enhance it. She's got a program called Rock Your Relationship Movement. So hi, Robyn.
Hi, Doreen. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I know we're going to have a juicy conversation. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
juicy, nice. I'll read the bio. Robyn Smith is an award-winning speaker and leading trauma communication and relationship coach for women. Founder of Rock Your Relationship Movement, she's helped thousands transform frustration into fulfillment by cultivating deeper, more conscious, and loving connections. With her thriving 23-year marriage, I was going to say 23. No, you have not had 23 marriages. With her thriving 23-year marriage as inspiration, Robyn combines practical relationship strategies with emotional healing to create lasting change. Her approach goes beyond communication, reshaping how women experience love and connection. And as a certified master trauma coach, she specializes in helping clients break free from trauma and unhealthy patterns, restoring harmony within relationships, and within themselves. Oh, I if I never had a conversation with you, I feel like I'm already learning and inspired. This is wonderful. Thank you for writing it up in such a way that it shows so much of who you are and what you do and what people can get from you.
My pleasure. Thanks for your feedback. Yeah.
How do you feel when you hear it?
Oh, it sounds good to me too. I mean, I like my journey. I've learned a lot along the way, and I love what I do. So I'm quite proud to be where I am these days. Yeah. Always learning more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's every moment is an opportunity to learn. And obviously, what I'm doing for folks today is to present you as somebody that we can learn from. So what we'd like to do here first is to take a peek at your history. Where were you born? What kind of family did you have? Because in my opinion, as a psychologist, that's where I believe we first have an experience of having a voice or not. And that is, I like to always start with that context, that foundation of, well, where did you start? And did you have a voice? Did you feel like you had a voice early on or not?
I like that question. So the answer is yes, and I'll share the context. I was born in Los Angeles, and to my parents who had one other child, my older brother. And so there was just the four of us. And then they got divorced when I was about 2.5, something like that. So I was wanted. I had there was an easy delivery. Birth was good. Everything was smooth in that way. So there's some good and some not so good stuff that happened in the early years. Another early trauma I will mention, because it's something I only learned about maybe 12 years ago, was that when I was just like 5.5 months old or something like that, my parents went on a trip across the country and left me and my brother with the grandparents. And they left us for 2 weeks so they could do this whatever thing. Didn't matter. The doctor, Dr. Spock in those days was like, yeah, you can do that. You can wean your child and leave them for 2 weeks when they're less than 6 months. So that just clicked some things into place for me when I had learned about that as I was studying relationships already, at that point. It's like, oh, no wonder I've got all these issues. So, yeah.
Well, I think, yes, I just realized, and you pointed to, that's our first relationship.
Oh, yeah, exactly. With your mother, especially. Yeah.
Even
Mm,
before you're born, you're relating, right?
that's right. And she's relating to you or not very much. Yeah. Or, yeah. Yeah. Go off on
So,
that.
so there were two things that already just pop out. You mentioned this abandonment kind of, even though it was in an adult, it seems like 2 weeks is not long, but in a little baby, not even a toddler, just brand new here in this world, saying hello, who am I, where am I, and who loves me, and how do I survive? And all of a sudden, gone is the primary person that you had been with for all those months, 9 months, and then a few out here.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the second one was around the divorce. They broke up.
Yeah, yeah. There's a third one, but so, in the early days, and my early days are more recent than some, but when my mother had knee surgery, it wasn't what they do now, right? This arthroscopic thing. She was in the hospital for 10 days and there was no visitation. So when I was 1.5, that happened. She got knee surgery, and again, there was like, where's mom? I was
Mhm.
1.5. I couldn't see her for 10 days. I didn't know how to make sense of that. And then the divorce a year later. So when I was just before 3 years old. So yeah, yeah. So a few big breaks in the attachment bond
Mhm.
occurred there. Well, too. Yeah. And then with my father, because stayed with my mom, and then my father moved not very far away. So we did and always have had a good relationship with him. So thank goodness for that. Good things have come.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, with the idea of you being such a relationship coach and being able to go way down into that being the first kind of relationship with a mother, most likely whoever the caregiver is, or I guess it's a caregiver, right? And who carries us from that first conception? I haven't really thought about it or talked about it, and I don't usually go this far back, and I'm sure there's even what past lives, but this womb, you talked about attachment, this womb that's protecting us and kind of like like the chrysalis, we're inside and we're growing and we're
It's,
coming out to life.
yeah, it's such an important part of our growth. Obviously, we're growing so much in that time. And so many people do not have a very protected feeling in the womb, whether there's needles getting poked because your mom's unhealthy, or she's having blood infusions, or whatever's going on, or she's got toxic blood because she's a drug addict, or she's starving herself, or there's abuse and she's getting hurt, or she had an accident or a surgery. All sorts of stuff can happen in the womb that can really make an impact on our feeling of safety and being welcomed in the
Mhm.
world. So I'm grateful I didn't have that, but I know many people do, and I work with many people who do. Yeah.
Yeah. Safety is so important. Well, if we look at you in those early years, those first early years, what about voice?
Yeah. I love that we're on this topic because it was a big deal for me. I think I've shared with you a little bit, but I remember being very timid and like having a very quiet voice. And so as a child, I was thinking of another example as we were getting started. I'll see if I can remember, but I sucked my thumb until I was 8, right? So I had this security blanket that I think was probably related to the attachment issues. But I also, yeah, I was a smaller kid than all my friends. So I felt small, I acted small, and I would just not speak up as much. Like I would be quiet in class. And, I certainly wasn't one of the boisterous kids. And the distinct memory I have is the choir teacher coming around, we were singing, and she would come to each child and listen to them closely. And I don't think a peep came out of me. I think I mouthed the words, but I was so terrified that I don't think I was able to sing in front of her. So that's just an example of my own fear or insecurity coming through or not coming through my voice. But then on the other hand, like my parents were very supportive, I felt, and I knew I was loved. And so I remember later on, or similar time probably in elementary school, when we were raised Jewish, kind of light loosely, and I didn't want to get bat mitzvahed, and I was allowed to say no to that. Like I was really given that voice to say like, nah, it's not for me. I don't want to go through all that. And I also was allowed, actually at 5 years old, there's a picture of me with a big knot on the side of my head. You know what happens when you don't comb your hair? Like it's like one big ball of hair just stuck out. And that's because I said no to my mother brushing my hair, and she let me say no. And I really appreciate that. Of course, she probably felt embarrassed, or I don't know. But she let me have a voice in that way. And like, I don't want you to brush my hair. Okay, here's the consequences. And I didn't care or know about it. But that happened. And it wasn't like, we were impoverished or anything, and that was the reason. It was just I was allowed to have a voice. So kind of both sides of it, where I was allowed to have it at home, and yet I was scared to use it out more in the world.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I read was that you feel comfortable speaking up in situations that are, I guess, people you know or something, as opposed to other situations. I mean, there seems to be that same kind of dynamic that you're talking about even now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very cautious with what I say to whom and when, and I still find myself holding back sometimes in certain forums that I don't want to, I don't know, be judged, I suppose it is. And in other places, I just speak my truth and get judged.
I love what you just said. I mean, about the two circumstances that, where, and I think this speaks to listeners, is they can relate to perhaps there's some place where they feel more comfortable and confident and it doesn't matter whether they're judged, but then the places in which they might be judged. So in the places you might be judged, what might be the judgments that you would project? Or I'm not sure you're calling them projections, but that you might think that others would say about you.
Yeah, it's so a professional group where maybe I don't have the same level of training, and
Mm.
so I feel like a little shy or insecure about, what I know. And so even though I may have a strong opinion or like have something to think that I want to include, sometimes I do, and sometimes I just feel like, oh no, like what if I do it wrong or something, or like, it was clear that I don't know what I'm talking about or something like that. So that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
There's some measurement, some comparison.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And that,
I have that because as a psychologist, there's the kind of the traditional what what psychologists are traditionally seen as, and I feel like I'm kind of more on the spiritual side of growing from the inside and from an essence of who you are, and it's less about pathology. And I remember one of my clients, once I really learned more about mindfulness and dropping down into a deeper kind of listening, one of my clients actually said, this feels different. So I
nice.
think that's kind of the way in which a voice can come out from somebody like my client or like you is when the environment feels like it's a welcoming one, that it's listening, that it's interested. There's something about finding the right environment so our voice feels like it's fresh and flourishing.
I 100% agree. For me, anyway, like I'm pretty sensitive to whether I'm being heard. I think because of an early trauma around that. But so I don't like to speak if I know I'm not being heard. Like even to my husband, if he's like distracted, I'll just wait or I'll ask him to stop what he's saying because I don't want to, I don't like that feeling of somebody not listening to me. So, and I create a lot of environments and I've created many friendships and groups that I hold where there is a safe container, so to speak, where people know how to listen. And in my group, I set the container in that way that we don't interrupt and we, we're holding space and we're holding a space of compassion and understanding as best we can. So I am all for those kinds of spaces. And so often in the world, I find myself, in casual interactions where people aren't tuned into that. Like I have a person in the community who talks my head off, so to speak, every time I see him, and it's all about him. And I just find myself like overwhelmed or getting uninterested. And I don't want to spend time with him, even though he's a lovely guy in many ways, but it's very one-sided. And so for me, I need to feel like there's space for me, to speak. Like I want to be invited or included. I don't want to be interrupted or talked at. So,
Talked at. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Talked with. I like that expression, the communicating with the withness of it. And that's one of the things that I respect about you is that you value that kind of sense of relational relationalness. But I have to say that just one more before I move on in life and get curious about anything else that was a struggle around voice or how you felt like you found it, did or didn't. You mentioned trauma. Are you saying that trauma was what you've already pointed to, or?
yeah, that is. Yeah. So in my world, in trauma, it's not necessarily like abuse or a car accident, but just the complex or developmental trauma, the stuff that happens where you didn't get your needs met and you didn't feel
Uh-huh,
heard or loved or whatever the case was. So, so yeah,
uh-huh,
say those things that I mentioned were, I don't know, types of trauma of
mhm,
breaking the attachment bond and
mhm.
developmental trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then it seems like in terms of a connection that you have with another human being, which was abruptly cut. And then to me, I'm just going back to the sense of voice, like even, mama or the goo 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 gaga. Even that kind of thing is, where energy from you is received and welcomed and held, I guess. And it wasn't, even though like you're saying, even though it wasn't abuse or anything like that, and it wasn't even neglect, but it was at least not consciously.
Not
They
intentional.
weren't saying we're gonna forget this kid. No, because you felt love, but there was something. So that speaks to the deeper kind of what we're talking about, how deep trauma can be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to pick up on something that you said because it reminded me of this other piece when I was saying, I didn't feel heard and that I think
Hmm.
I could call that a trauma. But what used to happen and still happens with my mother, and I confronted her on this recently, like a year ago, but when I was a kid, she gets like very laser focused on something like crossword puzzles, something she's always done. So she would be doing that at the kitchen table or reading something, and I'd be like, Mom, 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 like I'm talking to you, and she wouldn't hear me. Like she wouldn't. Her ears were closed in a way. Not that she can't hear, but it was so frustrating, and I would get angry, like I'm talking to you, so
Uh-huh.
that feels related to what we're talking about as far as having a voice or, that space of getting heard or the space getting held for you to have a voice. So it was
Mhm.
like she did support me in having a voice and the boundaries and stuff. And then she unintentionally like didn't always hear me like and didn't like attend to me in these ways, like when I was calm. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. And that, like I said, that still happens sometimes. But we were able to talk about it like hello, like what? And she was able to name like, yeah, my stepdad's like, yeah, it happens to me too. Like she just doesn't hear like sometimes.
Mhm.
Now she has hearing aids, but then it's about her hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, so focused that, and then it was not intentional either,
Yeah,
that is,
wasn't for lack of love or yeah, I mean, maybe subconsciously, I don't know. But
yeah, yeah, subconsciously. Okay, well, okay, let's move through what happened as you started to take your place in the world. You probably went through schools and
yeah,
found
yeah.
anything else you want to say about this journey to be who you are today?
Well, I will say what is interesting is that I had a certain level of confidence and so I started teaching little kids gymnastics. I was a gymnast. I started teaching them gymnastics when I was in like sixth grade. And so I like talked to their parents, charged a fee, had them come to our yard. So that's just the beginning of like me having a confident voice and like, I can teach you something because I'm older than you and I know what I'm doing. So that continued. And my first, besides having jobs in college and whatnot and high school, I began to be a yoga teacher even before I got yoga teacher training. And back in the 90s, there weren't many yoga teacher trainings. It wasn't the thing that it is today. But yeah, I just felt like I want to teach yoga. I love yoga. And so that's where I really started putting myself out there as a voice to be listened to by multiple people at once. And I had a good time doing it. Although, as I shared, with you earlier, that I had my challenges of speaking up. Like, and I do have a belief that I don't have a loud voice. I'm not a boom. I can't be a booming voice. I don't project a lot, and it feels kind of effortful to try. So I tend to be soft spoken. It's just easier, and a lower tone. But especially since I'm hoarse today from my cold, but anyway, it was just often a thing as a child where I was told I was mumbling and
Oh,
I needed to speak up. So I was getting told that all the time. And then as a yoga teacher, I got told that a lot too. Not your mumbling, but please raise your voice.
mhm,
Yeah. So
mhm,
I don't, it doesn't happen so much anymore. But
mhm.
yeah.
One of my clients was a yoga teacher, and the only time she felt really confident to be speaking was when she had her own eyes closed in front of the group teaching from there. It was just all the eyes on her it provoked a lot of anxiety. But something you just said though around soft spoken, I so appreciate soft spokenness, and
Mm,
I would this whole idea about speak up or be more animated or vocal variety. Yeah, that I guess that's important in especially if you are trying to make a point or you're more of a performer type speaker. But I would love to see more of this, what I forget who wrote the book, Quiet in a Noisy World. Yeah,
I don't know.
that those of us who are quieter, that there's power, that people see that as powerful.
Yes.
Okay.
For me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a sense of yourself as somebody who had some kind of gift and expertise that you could be in front of people, other kids, and
Yeah.
teach. Nice.
Yeah. So I
Uh-huh.
just, yeah, as an adult, I started teaching yoga when I was 20, early 20s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Anything else about yoga and moving forward? And because how did you go from, I mean, that's a sensitive kind of profession, I think, is that it is an intuitive sense of your body and, helping others find a deeper sense of, I would say, I mean, there are different kinds of yogas, but I think the one you're talking about is the one where we become more aware of
Yeah.
ourselves.
Bells. Yeah. Yeah. I honestly feel like for me, and this is true with my current profession as well, it's just like the practice brings experience, brings confidence. So as that happens, I take my seat in a more confident, self-assured way. And over, years of experience, I do feel more, you know, confident, for lack of another better word, that I know what I'm talking about, that I've seen it, I've done it, I've been to lots of trainings, at some point I did a ton of training. And yeah, so that enabled me to just speak from a stronger place.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, stronger place, meaning I know what I know, and I I know how to talk
Yeah.
about it. I know how to share it. So there. Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And I still maybe needed to speak up sometimes, but that's okay. It was I think the confidence is more about what we're talking about than the volume, right? The voice.
Yes,
So, yeah.
absolutely. I'm glad you're making that point. So listeners hear that confidence is not about how loud you are, or even how much you have to say. It's a stronger sense of lining up with what you know inside of yourself and feel that kind of confidence. Well, your relationship. Let's go into how did you ever move into relationship counseling and coaching and
Yeah, right. So as a yoga teacher, I got really interested in the philosophy of yoga and Buddhist philosophy kind of first. So I studied and did a lot of meditation retreats and trainings and had my own practice and there was a lot of understanding about the psyche in that and how our relationship to ourself, mostly there. But I realized, well, it was quite obvious that I was having relationship problems in my life as a yoga teacher with colleagues, with some friends, not big problems, but I was disturbed here and there. And I had a relationship that did fall apart. Well, that I broke off to my first fiance. And so I started to realize like even though had all this great training and understanding of the psyche through yoga and meditation and my own practices and all I'd studied, I needed more help. I wasn't getting the relational support I needed through the yoga teachings and Buddhist teachings. So I got some counseling and that helped not so much. So I tried a few counselors over the years, but when I studied nonviolent communication and that was cool, but it wasn't really making the impact I was hoping it would make. And did that for a couple of years, like really solidly working with that practice. But when I finally did my deeper dive into the 2-year leadership and transformation training, that's where I was like, okay, this really speaks to me. And I was already in my yoga teaching about 18 years in at that time, like feeling like, I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep doing this. Like, I feel like there's something else. And I was really interested in psychology. My mother's a psychologist. She's now a psychoanalyst. My stepmother is a psychologist. My stepfather's a social worker. So it was around me, so I learned a lot about how to relate from them. And yeah, so I was interested in psychology and I thought I might go back to school, but I never did. So I ended up, becoming a coach and found this program. And first I just went for myself because I knew I needed to heal my relationship to myself and my friendships and, colleagues and whatnot. And then I just went, I want to help people with this. This is great. Like I'm growing so much. I know I can, once again, I know I can help, so I just started coaching people.
yeah. Oh, well, I love the way the dots just connected there to the time you were on your front yard and knowing you could teach people gymnastics and what you just said about in terms of what you do provide now or offer as a coach.
Yeah.
I heard in the interview, not the interview, but the bio that you said relationship with each other, but also relationship with yourself. So to me, I'm not sure it's like one before the other because both could be going on at the same time. It seems like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, I believe our relationship with ourselves informs and, drives our relationship to others. But our early relationships to others drives how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I see it. So like we created or how, whatever the right word might be, beliefs and identity structures, based on how we were treated and what our early circumstances were. And then those then go on to be the lenses that we look through and how we create our relationships. So am I answering a question? I forget the question.
Well, we're talking about relationships. We're talking about you and how we're just learning more about you and how you see people. What does relationship mean? Relationship to self is what you just said. And
Yeah.
given that I say that I get so involved in my curiosity with you, I forget to take a break. I need to take a quick break and I'll be right back.
If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com.
Hi, we're back with Robyn Smith, my guest today, talking about the ways in which relationship, whether it's to ourselves or to another person or just to our lives, in fact, how we come to that and how we are we with people really, or are we ourselves and just really not aware that how we relate is part of what our life is mostly what our life is about, is just what I'm realizing with you today, Robyn. So Robyn had a whole history of yoga, and I really appreciate that. You said you had yoga, you were teaching in the no, I was teaching it in the 70s.
No,
Believe it or not, in Malaysia, when I was in the Peace Corps, I taught yoga and I learned it and taught it for a while then. So I deeply appreciate what it can do. But so where we are now, folks, in our conversation is we're moving into Robyn as a relationship coach and learning what that actually looks like for her and how she helps people do that.
yeah, yeah. Great. And so to pick up on where I was trying to go earlier before the break, is so often people come into my group program and, as you said, the program is called Rock Your Relationship Immersion Program. And so people come in wanting support with their relationships, and they absolutely get it. And I give a lot of tools and coaching. But so often my clients will say, I realize this program is really about my relationship with myself. I was like, yes, you are right. Even though I'm giving you all these communication tools and how to set boundaries and yada, yada, it's all rooted in the deeper work. The deepest work is what's driving these issues, right? How I'm thinking about it, what I'm making it mean that he said that, or that's happening in my life, or, so I really do believe that it's that core work. Our self-worth is a big part of it, that I work with clients on, and I feel like is a real pillar of a healthy relationship, is how we feel about and treat ourselves, and if we feel we're lovable or not, and likable and all those things. And so the anxiety and, working with those issues. And again, it's just like the nervous system and all this stuff that affects our sense of self, and then how we perceive others and what they're saying and what it means and things like that is all colored by that and our early life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, like an example is so common I hear about in my own relationship and others too, where someone says something, maybe pointing out a thing, and the other person takes it so personally, or is like thinks it's being critical when it's not. They're like, you're criticizing me. It's like, it's not a criticism. And I see that, when I coach couples, it's like, but that's the lenses they're wearing. Like, I do everything wrong in your eyes, and, I can't do anything right. And that's because of where they've come from. They were probably criticized a lot. So then every little thing that someone says feels like a criticism, when that's their lenses, they're wearing, and it's not necessarily true. So we all do that, I think, to a certain extent, until we do the work that helps us to like release those layers, and we can be more connecting from the heart, connecting from that deeper place that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of words, but
Yeah, no, I feel like I could spend hours and hours going into some of what you're bringing up around relationship counseling and just the ways in which I've brought when I've worked with people, and that kind of not listening to what the other person is really saying, how to drop what you think they're saying, and to have them listen from a deeper place. You mentioned heart, so it's like, well, how do you listen to your partner from your heart?
I missed a little what you said because of
You
my,
froze a little bit. Well, I was talking about just, I'm enjoying our conversation, and it's about this idea of in relationships, people, it's what you were saying is that the listening to somebody in a new way, I think, is probably what you teach. And you talked about heart and how to listen without all the layers that have been built up around you and how you think or how you believe or what you believe or
yeah.
about what was said to you. So it, to me, it feels like a kind of a fuller, well, it's almost like yoga. The yoga of relationship or something.
I used to use that term, yoga of relationships. That's what I called my work.
Uh-huh.
People thought I was talking about partner yoga, so I stopped using it, but yes,
Well,
totally.
I certainly understand. So we're moving towards the end. Like I said, I'm enjoying and want to go on and on, but you have some programs, you have some offers, and they'll be in the show notes. But if there's anything you want to say about that right now,
Yeah.
let's.
So depending on when you're listening, I do a free communication training I call the code, the connection code, and I give solid communication skills. So it's an online, usually 4-day event. So check that out because there's some really great communication skills and people get a lot out of that. And then I have my connection cure checklist, communication checklist. So because so many people struggle with communication, I offer these free tools. But in each one of them, I also kind of peel off the layer of what might be underneath. And so in the checklist, you're going to see like, skills for how to shift the pattern if you didn't check the box, like what's going on there. And in the communication training too, we look a little bit underneath as well. So I hope you all take advantage of those free offerings and click on the link.
Great. Well, yeah, we're opening it up right now, this last bit of time together to have you reflect on having been in this moment with me and the listeners and being you. What, when you listen to yourself right now, what do you want to leave listeners with?
Value yourself and do the work, i.e., get the support that you need to feel that you're valuable and lovable so that you can have a life that you love, because that will support you in having work that you love, relationships that work for you, a lifestyle that you like. So that again, core pillar is so important. And then we all deserve support. So I encourage everyone to get support from somebody they trust and feel good with to help them get to the place where they love their lives.
I love what you just said. Place where you get to love your life. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.